Think you know America's emptiest places? These 10 towns have populations smaller than your high school graduating class. But what happened to make entire communities vanish isn't what you'd expect, and the reasons might be closer to your own neighborhood than you realize. One place has been literally on fire since 1962, Centralia, Pennsylvania. The underground inferno. Centralia, Pennsylvania looks like your typical small town until you notice the steam rising from cracks in the sidewalk. What started as a routine trash burn in 1962 accidentally ignited an underground coal seam that's still burning today, over 60 years later. The fire spread through a labyrinth of abandoned mine tunnels beneath the town, creating a disaster that would reshape an entire community. The numbers tell a devastating story. Centralia's population plummeted from 2,761 residents in 1981 to just 5 people according to the 2020 census. That's a 99.8% population decline in less than 40 years. The federal government spent $42 million relocating families and condemning properties, turning a thriving community into a ghost town. Walking through Centralia today feels surreal. Ground temperatures reach 900 degrees Fahrenheit in some areas, hot enough to melt shoes. Toxic gases including carbon monoxide seep through the earth, making the air dangerous to breathe. Most homes have been demolished, leaving behind empty lots where families once lived. The few remaining residents refuse to leave despite health warnings and government buyout offers. Scientists estimate the underground fire contains enough coal to burn for another 250 years. The Postal Service revoked Centralia's zip code in 2002, officially erasing it from the map. Highway Route 61, which once ran through town, now detours around the unstable ground where sinkholes regularly open without warning. While Centralia burned from below, the next town froze in time from economic collapse above ground. Bodie, California. The Wild West freeze frame. Bodie, California represents economic collapse in perfect preservation. This former gold rush boomtown once housed 10,000 residents during its 1879 peak, complete with 65 saloons, a thriving red light district, and enough violence to earn the nickname the most lawless town in the West. Today, you'll find 0 permanent residents but 110 buildings frozen exactly as their owners left them. The gold ran out faster than anyone expected. What took decades to build unraveled in just a few years as mines closed and families packed up. The last year-round residents abandoned Bodie in 1942, leaving behind furniture, dishes, and personal belongings that still sit untouched in many buildings. California designated it a state historic park in 1962, creating an accidental time capsule of Wild West life. Nature played a role in Bodie's isolation. Winter temperatures plummet to 20 below zero, and snowdrifts reach 10 feet high, cutting off access for months at a time. The harsh climate actually helped preserve the town by discouraging vandalism and development. Park rangers maintain the site in a state of arrested decay, meaning they stabilize buildings but don't restore them. Over 200,000 tourists visit Bodie annually, making it more popular now than during its mining days. Visitors peer through dusty windows at 19th-century schoolrooms, churches, and homes where families simply walked away from their lives. The irony is striking. Bodie attracts more people as a dead town than it ever did as a living community. Bodie preserved its past perfectly, but the next location couldn't decide which state it belonged to. Glenrio, Texas. New Mexico, the state line ghost. Glenrio straddles the Texas-New Mexico border so precisely that you can stand with 1 foot in each state. Founded in 1903 as a railroad stop, this tiny community never exceeded 50 residents even during its 1950s heyday when Route 66 brought steady streams of cross-country travelers. The town's unique geography created both its identity and its downfall. For decades, Glenrio thrived as a crucial pit stop on America's most famous highway. Travelers needed gas, food, and rest before crossing the desolate stretches of desert ahead. The town's businesses clustered around the state line, creating an odd situation where customers might buy gas in Texas and eat lunch in New Mexico without taking more than 20 steps. Everything changed in 1975 when Interstate 40 bypassed Route 66, redirecting traffic miles away from Glenrio. The economic impact was immediate and devastating. Within a decade, every business had closed. The post office shuttered in 1983, and the last gas station pumped its final gallon in 1985. The town that once served thousands of travelers each day suddenly served no one. Glenrio's dual-state existence creates ongoing legal complications. Which state handles law enforcement? Who maintains the roads? Where do you pay taxes if you live on the state line? These questions became academic when the last residents departed, but they illustrate how geography can complicate governance in unexpected ways. Today, abandoned buildings and rusted signs mark where this border community once welcomed weary travelers crossing the American Southwest. While Glenrio couldn't pick a state, the next town picked the wrong industry entirely: Rhyolite, Nevada. The desert mirage city. Rhyolite, Nevada, built itself into a modern metropolis faster than any desert town had a right to. By 1908, just 5 years after its founding, this gold rush boomtown boasted electric lights, water mains, telephone service, an opera house, and even its own stock exchange. The population peaked at 5,000 residents in 1907, making it one of Nevada's largest cities at the time. The infrastructure impressed visitors from established eastern cities. Rhyolite featured a 3-story school building, multiple newspapers, and a railroad depot that connected it to the outside world. Investors poured money into elaborate buildings, convinced they were creating the next San Francisco. The town's rapid growth seemed to justify their optimism and spending. Then the gold disappeared. Mine production plummeted 90% between 1910 and 1915, devastating the local economy overnight. Without precious metals to extract, there was no reason for anyone to endure the harsh Mojave Desert conditions. By 1920, Rhyolite was completely abandoned, its grand buildings left to crumble under the relentless desert sun. Today, you'll find an eerie outdoor museum among the ruins. Artists have installed ghostly sculptures throughout the abandoned town site, including The Last Supper, a haunting display of life-sized white figures seated at a table in the desert. These modern installations create a surreal contrast with the century-old ruins, turning Rhyolite into an accidental commentary on boom and bust economics. The desert reclaimed most structures within decades, proving that even the most ambitious plans can't overcome geographic reality. Rhyolite's desert location doomed it, but the next town had perfect geography and still failed. Cairo, Illinois. The strategic disaster. Cairo, Illinois sits at the strategic confluence of America's 2 most important rivers, the Mississippi and Ohio. With such prime geography, you'd expect this town to thrive as a major transportation and commerce hub. Instead, Cairo represents one of the most dramatic urban collapses in American history, losing 89% of its population since 1920. The numbers reveal a community in freefall. Cairo's population peaked at 15,203 residents in 1920, making it a significant regional center. By the 2020 census, only 1,733 people remained. That's nearly 9 out of every 10 residents gone over the course of a century. Economic indicators paint an even bleaker picture. Cairo's unemployment rate has consistently run twice the national average since the 1990s. Despite its tiny population, the crime rate sits 114% above the national average, creating a dangerous environment that drives away the few remaining residents and potential businesses. Multiple factors contributed to Cairo's decline. Repeated river flooding devastated the downtown area throughout the 20th century. Racial tensions erupted into violence during the civil rights era, damaging the community's social fabric. Economic isolation increased as river commerce shifted to other ports and manufacturing jobs disappeared. Walking through Cairo today, you'll see grand 19th century buildings standing empty beside vacant lots, where neighborhoods once thrived. The rivers that should have been Cairo's greatest assets became symbols of its isolation from the prosperity flowing past its shores. Cairo had two major rivers but couldn't stay afloat, while our next location had mountain beauty but no staying power. St. Elmo, Colorado. The Alpine abandonment. St. Elmo, Colorado sits at 10,036 feet above sea level, making it one of America's highest ghost towns. Founded in 1878 during the Silver Boom, this alpine community once housed 2,000 residents who braved extreme conditions to extract precious metals from the surrounding mountains. The elevation that brought wealth through mining ultimately sealed the town's fate. The silver ran out faster than anyone anticipated. By the early 1900s, most mines had closed, and families began their descent to lower elevations. The last year-round residents abandoned St. Elmo in 1952, unable to endure another brutal mountain winter in economic isolation. Nature played a decisive role in St. Elmo's abandonment. The town receives over 100 inches of snow annually, creating drifts that can bury entire buildings. Road access remains impossible for 5 to 6 months each year, cutting off supplies and emergency services during the harshest weather. Even today, visitors can only reach St. Elmo during summer months when mountain passes finally clear. Ironically, St. Elmo attracts more people now than during its mining heyday. Over 10,000 tourists visit annually to explore 43 preserved buildings, including the general store, schoolhouse, and mining offices. The extreme elevation that drove away permanent residents now draws adventure seekers and history enthusiasts willing to make the challenging journey. The town serves as a perfect example of how geographic isolation can preserve history while preventing sustainable communities from taking root. St. Elmo's high altitude isolated it seasonally, but the next town was cut off permanently by corporate decisions. Thurman, West Virginia. The vanishing railroad hub. Thurman, West Virginia was abandoned by the railroad companies that created it. This once bustling rail hub transported coal from Appalachian mines to industrial centers across America, supporting around 500 residents during the 1930s boom era. When the coal industry mechanized and rail routes changed, corporate decisions left entire communities stranded without economic purpose. The decline happened gradually, then all at once. Families moved away as railroad jobs disappeared and coal production shifted to other regions. The town school closed in 1956 when there weren't enough children left to justify keeping it open. The post office held on until 1995, serving the handful of residents who refused to abandon their mountain home. Today's Thurman exists in bureaucratic limbo. The 2020 census recorded exactly 4 permanent residents, making it one of America's smallest incorporated towns. The National Park Service owns 80% of the remaining buildings, creating an unusual situation where federal employees manage most of a living community. What's left feels frozen in time. Empty houses line the single main street, their front porches still equipped with rocking chairs facing railroad tracks that rarely see trains anymore. The few residents maintain a quiet existence, surrounded by abandoned neighbors' homes, creating an eerie sense of isolation even within their own community. Thurman represents how corporate decisions can devastate small towns overnight, leaving behind communities too small to sustain basic services but too stubborn to completely disappear. Thurman shrank to almost nothing, but the next location went from boom to complete bust twice. Eagle Mountain, California, the double death town. Eagle Mountain, California died twice, making it unique among America's ghost towns. Kaiser Steel built this company town in 1948 to house workers at their massive iron ore mine in the Mojave Desert. For 35 years, families endured blazing summers and isolated winters to extract the raw materials that built America's post-war infrastructure. The first death came in 1983, when Kaiser Steel closed the mine, eliminating the only reason anyone lived in this remote desert location. Within months, nearly all residents packed up and left for cooler climates with better job prospects. Eagle Mountain seemed destined to become another abandoned mining town. Then came the resurrection attempt. During the 1990s, a private company proposed converting Eagle Mountain into a massive prison complex, betting that California's tough-on-crime policies would create demand for remote correctional facilities. The plan would have brought jobs and population back to the dead town, creating a second life built on incarceration rather than mining. The prison plan ultimately failed due to environmental concerns and local opposition. Today, Eagle Mountain sits empty and fenced off, privately owned but completely abandoned. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit, making the desert location nearly uninhabitable without industrial-scale air conditioning and water supplies. The town's double abandonment illustrates how economic desperation can drive communities to consider almost any industry, no matter how different from their original purpose. Eagle Mountain died twice in the desert heat, but our final location froze to death in permanent winter. Kennecott, Alaska, the frozen company town. Kennecott, Alaska, represents the ultimate frozen company town, where winter temperatures average 10 degrees below zero and accessibility exists only 4 to 5 months each year. Built by the Kennecott Copper Corporation in 1911, this remote mining operation extracted some of the world's richest copper ore from the Rangel Mountains, generating over $100 million in 1920s currency over 27 years of operation. The logistics of running Kennecott defied common sense. Everything had to be transported by railroad through treacherous mountain passes or packed in by foot during brief summer months. The population peaked at 600 residents in the 1920s, creating a self-contained community complete with hospital, school, recreation hall, and general store, all designed to keep workers comfortable in one of America's most hostile environments. When the high-grade copper ore ran out in 1938, the company simply walked away. Workers abandoned tools, furniture, and personal belongings, expecting to return someday. They never did. The extreme cold preserved everything exactly as it was left, creating an accidental time capsule of industrial life. Today, Kennecott sits within Rangel St. Elias National Park, accessible only by small plane or a challenging hike. The 14-story mill building still dominates the landscape, its red structures standing out dramatically against white glaciers and gray mountains. Visitors can peer into offices where ledger books remain open on desks and see machinery frozen in place mid-operation. These 10 towns share common threads that reveal disturbing patterns about community vulnerability. The pattern behind the emptiness. Every ghost town we've explored reveals the same dangerous pattern. Economic monoculture combined with geographic isolation equals community death. Whether mining copper in Alaska or shipping coal in West Virginia, these towns bet everything on single industries that eventually disappeared. When the mines closed or railroads rerouted, entire communities had no economic backup plan. Geographic isolation amplified every problem. Centralia's underground fire might have been manageable in a well-connected city with multiple evacuation routes and economic alternatives. Instead, the remote Pennsylvania location made relocation the only viable option. Similarly, Kennecott's Alaskan isolation turned a normal mine closure into permanent abandonment because no other industries could survive the logistics. Climate and environmental factors accelerated the abandonment process. St. Elmo's brutal winters, Eagle Mountain's desert heat, and Rhyolite's water scarcity made these locations uninhabitable once their economic purpose vanished. Communities that might have adapted to economic change couldn't overcome environmental hostility without industrial-scale resources. These historical patterns appear in modern America today. The Economic Innovation Group reports that 25% of U.S. counties lost population between 2010 and 2020, with rural areas most vulnerable. Small towns dependent on single employers face the same risks that doomed our ghost towns. Factory closures, hospital shutdowns, and retail consolidation create modern versions of mine closures and railroad abandonment. The lesson is clear. Economic diversification and geographic connectivity aren't luxuries for communities, they're survival requirements. Towns that ignore these historical warnings risk joining America's growing list of places where nobody lives anymore.